Hello and welcome back to Learn JavaScript with Creative Coding. I am Dr. Abstract right here. Hello, Doctor. This is a form done on the canvas. Look at how high I can count. Ooh, I can count to 1, 2, 3. That's hilarious. And then we can use the ZIM ColorPicker to change the color and we can submit. Thank you. So nice, huh? And we've been showing this one throughout our data module. We're finally, this is I think our last, well, the last video on traditional data. We may come back and do some videos on sockets depending on things, how things go. So look forward to that. But as the final video here with traditional data to a database, we are going to take a look at how this was done. All right, well, let's go check some code. So we did an HTML version. Oops, that's not going to do it. There we go. We did an HTML version of that form as well. That was built after our Canvas form, sort of modeled on that. And we took a look through the videos to do that with an HTML form going to PHP and MySQL. So you can go back and take a look at those videos if you're interested in the HTML versions. Now we're going to see how we can do this type of thing from the canvas here in ZIM. So we're in a ZIM template, 10.9.0. We're going to use some binding coming up. So you'll need 10.9.0 and beyond. Here's our frame. The point isn't really to look through the ZIM stuff right now, but rather specifically the binding, although there's some fun ZIM stuff to look at as we create this. We may as well just take a quick peek at that as well. So here is our bind object, and we saw bind objects in the, well, in the very first data one where we bound to the local storage. That's fine, except it's only saves locally. And then we saw the bind object being used in the last video to show you how you could save, say, shapes in a collage across the internet with PHP in a database. So if you haven't seen that video, you'll definitely want to pop back one video and check out that. So we've got our bind object. It's set up the same way as in the last video. We're using get at the moment, so we can test locally if we desire. We're calling the canvas.php. And we're sending the type if it's get or post. We're also making sure that we set the bind type of the bind to that type as well. Don't forget to do that. We've turned our reports on so that we can see what's happening there. Now this one's a little bit different from the last one. The last one, we wanted to know the information from the database right away so we could set the shapes to whatever somebody else had set the shapes to, or whatever they were set to in the past. Here we don't care about that. We've got a form. We're just going to basically send the information from the form, so we do not need to call a from, and we do not need to wait to get the data. We're just going to start in on our ZIM stuff. So here's a label. This is the label. Let's go see the picture. Each one of these, this is our form. This is acting as our form, and this is also acting as our form here. But each one has a label. Look at that. Name is one label. The color, another label. How high can you count? Another label. And then our submit button will be a button. There's also a particle emitter in the background that's operating as that happens, and an icon here. All right, back in. So the label's not really doing anything. We just put it there. It's showing the big question name, and we're going to wiggle that. There we are, wiggling it. See how easy this stuff is? Isn't that fun? Although you don't know what these numbers are. You have to get used to these numbers a little bit. This is our starting value, so we're going to start with a -40 rotation. We're going to wiggle 1 to 2 degrees, so only 1 to 2 degrees in 700 to 900 milliseconds. So that is setting its rotation wiggle, but we're also wiggling the scale on that, and that's the effect that you get, saying, hey, now one cool thing you could do is if you don't wiggle it, keep it still, and then if you try and submit without changing, so if we had no name in there and I go to submit, it would say, please enter your name. At that point, if you wanted to, you could then wiggle. You could wiggle it even more. You could say, hey, here's what you're missing. You're missing the name. So you can do things like that too. All right, back in. Then we have a text area. Now this text area it will hold our name data, and if we want to, we could put a placeholder in there, check this out, and that looks like this. Refresh, name, but we've already got a big name in behind there, so we don't want to do the name there, so we commented that. But just showing you that the ZIM version of the TextArea can do that, because the TextArea is actually just overlaid onto ZIM. We do that automatically for you, and we handle the scaling for you, which is pretty tricky to do, all that, I must admit. So that you could just say, give me a new TextArea, and hopefully not worry about it. But one thing that you do need to worry about, if say you wanted your particle emitter to go on top of this TextArea, you can't do that. You'd have to make a new ZIM frame and pop that up on top of everything, including this HTML TextArea. So this HTML TextArea is an HTML overlay. Therefore, you can't get the ZIM canvas to come up on top of that overlay unless you set up a whole new frame that's at a higher level. All right, so there's the TextArea. Now here's the cool bind. Check that out. Hey, that's all you have to do to get this stuff to get sent to the server. Isn't that neat? Now we've set the bind up here, so you see how sort of separated this is. There's where we're sending it, and here's the bind. Please bind this data to, now what we've done is that's the name of the binding, and it happens to be name because that's what we're asking for. And then this is the property that we want to share, that we want to send. It's the text property of the TextArea. With a form, you'll probably find that it's one property each. But if you're binding, for instance, in the collage where we bound things like the X and the Y and the level, you could bind the color, you could bind the shape. So it might just be shape, and then you bind all those properties. At that point, you would put these into an array, and you would have an array of properties. This would work too, but you don't need the array if you're only doing one property. Here's the emitter, so nothing much to see about that. We made sure that we use the same colors. We're emitting a rectangle. We're passing in, I mean, this is so nice to be able to do things like that. That's the width of the rectangle, so we're passing in the ZIM VEE value there, which is the pick value. A min and a max is allowed. Here's another one. For the colors, we're passing in a ZIM VEE value of an array, which means it will pick randomly from that array. And there's an outline and the border, or a border, and the border width, border color, border width. No gravity. So instead of these things falling down, are we local here in this? Yeah, we are. Let's just pop in. Normally gravity, I think, is 10, so we can comment that out. Here's what it would look like if we gravitied that. So as I increase, oh, you can't tell too much, but those things are falling down. I think they were. Let's not do a force on it. The force is what's shooting them out more. And we refresh here, and you can tell that they are indeed going down. If we increase the life of them, they're falling down. But we set it. Oops, why? We set it up with a no going down and just forcing everything out, and so it's kind of like shooting out basically. We're starting pause so that when we can press on the stepper right here, as soon as the stepper changes, this is the number stepper there. Well, it's not actually a number stepper, it is using numbers, but it can step other things like strings. You could have a bunch of labels or strings in there as well and look through those. But whenever we change that, then we're spurting the emitter. That's how that stuff is done. And then we're binding this, the stepper object. We're binding that called count, and we're binding its current value property. So when the current value changes, that will be set up. It's not set immediately, but anytime you call true, a general true, then it would get sent. Or if you wanted to, or sorry, not true, two. One of those words, two or true, close. And whenever you call two, if it's a general two, you don't put anything in the brackets, then all of the binding information would get sent, including the count as a current value there. But if you want to, you could send 2 of only the count by sending 2 and then passing in count, or sending 2, calling 2 and passing in stepper. So you can either pass in the object, or you could pass in the ID, or either or both, or combinations, an array of different ones as well. And then you would only send that data to the server. So you've got a choice. You send all the data that is bound. The other thing you can do is when you set up a bind, you can choose whether you want this bind to be a to bind, or a from bind, or a to from bind, or a from to. I think it's a from to bind. So by default, it does both. It binds both ways, but you can also make it so that you could only ever send to from this binding, or only ever receive from in this binding. Okay. Here's the label for the count, nothing much there, and here's the color picker. So now when the color picker changes, we change the frame color. We're also binding the color picker. And the label for the color picker. Here's where it all happens now. This is the button. When we press the button here, we animate that button in. We don't need to bind the button, but when we click on the button, we're going to check for the name first. So if there's nothing in the name, then we pop up this pane and we return. We don't go any further. The pane's down below here. There's a ZIM pane. And it's going to start off, well, it will have a default error of please enter name, and we can pop that in there at any time. All right, so that's the pane that is popping up. And if we are successful, we've got a name in there, then we're going to bind to. So this is us sending the bind information to the server. There's also a bind.to.lock, which can be used to send information to the server. And make sure that that information doesn't get overwritten. Now, what that does is what to.lock will do is it will receive from the server first. So as soon as you call the to.lock, it gets data from the server, the latest data from the server. In doing so, it also locks the record on the server so nobody else can add data to it. Then it takes the data from the server, it lets you play with it or change it or update it or whatever, and then it completes the to. It sends that data back and unlocks the record. And that way the record that is stored there won't be overwritten, that you won't lose data. So if somebody else comes in and tries to do a to from at the same time, or a to from the same time, it will sleep until the data has been entered. It doesn't take long to do the data. It's just like a bing bang back to the server. But so it sleeps for that short amount of time and then lets the other person update or receive the data back from the server and update it. So it's a neat system. That's the to from. We didn't have that initially in ZIM when we built our tower and launched this. We didn't realize that was going to happen. And then we built the tower and somebody would submit something and it would overwrite the data of somebody else, or well, if somebody else then submitted after, it would overwrite that data because they didn't have the same data. So we implemented the to from and solved that problem live while people were talking in the tower. Scary. Fun. It brought back memories of doing that kind of stuff. I used to do a lot of forum-based games back in the early days of the internet, and I recalled, oh yeah, that's right, we got to do that stuff to lock the record. Oh yeah. So we implemented it here in ZIM with a to.lock. We won't need this here because all we're doing, and what we're going to do is every time we send to the server, we're making a new record. So there's no problem with overwriting somebody else's record because we're always inserting a new record. That would only be, you'd use to.lock if you're storing data in the same record as somebody else is storing data. Like how we were handling the room. They're basically for the room. Oh, did you see the room? I don't think I showed it to you. I showed it to you in the last video. So just in case, we'll show you the tower talk here to get a sense of what we're talking about. When you press the tower talk right here, this information is stored in one record. So every room, or every window here, every room has one record in the database table. So if I started typing, let me type, yes, I think help grow personally. I am growing. and then talk. There it says I am growing talk. But if I had only received, if somebody else was around and we didn't lock the record, as mentioned, it might be that whatever they submitted later, if they didn't have the latest data, they wouldn't know I am growing, and whatever they selected would overwrite that single record for this room. Then we use the to lock. So we're all sharing data of this room. And the neat thing is that data is stored as JSON from the bind, and we really don't have to do anything on the server, which is nice. So we don't have to split things up into different, what people said. Normally, this would be a record, this one would be a record, this one would be a record, this one would be, and you know, it gets to be a little bit annoying on the database side. But we're using JSON to store all these things all as one string and be able to get them back. It's quite nice. All right, coming back to our code here, we've got something exciting. Aside from the to and to-lock conversation, we've got a filter, and I love this. This is just so amazing. When we send something to, we have a chance of putting in a function for a filter. This is a function that will run before the to data gets sent. And that function receives the data. It also receives the command and extra, and receives the bind object so that you could stop the to if you want. You can also stop the to with bind.stop, I think. But anyway, because sometimes imagine you got to filter, somebody's trying to send something, and you say, oh, wait a minute, we don't actually want to send that. We want to stop that from being sent. You could do that. But the other cool thing is once you receive the data here, the filter is responsible for also returning the data. So the data is coming in to this function, and then you need to return the data back out. And then it continues along, the bind continues along. When you receive something from the server, if you ask for something from the server, first you have to send the request to the server. So we give you a bind, the from has a filter that runs before it gets sent, and the filter runs after the information comes back. So it's got two sets of filters, at which point you would have two different commands. You would have a to from and then a from. Here the command would just be a to, so the filter only runs once. But isn't that neat? The filter allows you to adjust the data or see what's in the data and do something at all these steps of the binds, and it's very neat, and you can use the command to guide you through that. If you want, you can look at the code for the tower. It's up there, zimjs.com/tower, and look at the HTML code, Control-U to view the source, and you can see the filters being used extensively in that to join words. Like if somebody talks, we use the filter to join what they say to the main data of the room, and then we send that off, and it goes to the server. So it's things like that that we can do. Here, we ran into a little strange glitch on our server, on our ZIM servers that are hosted. Our PHP doesn't seem to like number signs being passed into their JSON. I don't know what's going on with that. So we did a little filter here that converted the color, because remember the ColorPicker is actually going to give you a number sign version of a color, like number sign C73592 or something. And so a little glitch, we found that was causing an error. So what we're doing is we're taking the color from this is the data. So we've got the data coming from, we don't even really care where that data came from. We just know that that data has color in it. So the data has a color property in it, and it's got a selected color property too. It's sort of a nested thing. That's the ID, that's the property. And we're passing that into our ZIM convert color. And we made a special one called ZIM, which will convert if there's a ZIM color and you look at that ZIM color, like you console.log it or zog it, it will tell you one with a number sign. It's sort of unrecognizable. So we now have a way to convert that ZIM color back into blue, the ZIM blue or the ZIM pink or whatever it is. So here it is. We're doing that. And that's what we're going to set. So here's the data. Here's the color, selected color. We're adjusting it to that that blue color or the red. So if we want, we can put in here zog, what color? How about pink? Data.color. Just copy that. Data.color.selected color. So we've made a change to our data. Now, do you remember what I said in the last lesson about this? we have to watch it. Oh, I think we'll be okay. If we were going to zog the whole data, like if we just said, okay, what does the data look like now? We might find that the data gets changed later through the process. And it may very well be that what you're zogging when you zog the data is the latest data and not the data at this point, at this filter. So at that time, it would be a good idea for you to say bind.data. Bind.report. Report, like that. And it'll pass the data now. So we could do that and have a look at, we may as well do that. That's a bind report, and it will take a snapshot of the data at this time, and we'll be able to see that ZIM color chosen. Shall we do it? So come here, we don't need the tower talk anymore. We refresh here, and we do what? Change color. Let's pull this up, F12. And change the color to blue. What happened? Blue, and we have to submit. Right, okay, so change the color to blue, submit. Please enter name. Good. ZIM. And submit. Do you see anything? Oh, we're looking for the data report, right? And so this is the data report that comes back from that report. We open this up, and we see that the object is empty at that time. Great. Let's see. So here we got a success coming back. Nowhere do we see the bind. Why would the object be empty? That's a snapshot at the time. Oh, I know. This is only the data. So it's a little bit different here. This is the filter. So the data is coming in. The bind report actually shows you the properties stored on the bind. So that won't happen until we actually return the data there. So anyway, we may as well just do. So that's interesting, and that's helpful. At this moment, when we're sending to, we know that the current data in the bind is nothing at the moment. So that can actually help us, but it's not what we want right now. We want a zog, so we'll zog back to our zog pink, all of this stuff. The data color, select a color, and let's have a look. It should have said blue. So we refresh here. We pick blue, I guess, and hit, type in a name, test, and submit. Blue. So our pink says blue. If we didn't have this, if we didn't do the filter, well, I guess we wouldn't have done that. We still need to return the data, otherwise you'll get, if you forget to return the data like this, here's what happens. We refresh, we type in test, we pick blue, and we submit. It says bind warning in yellow. 2, warning, a filter may not have returned the data. So you would need to make sure that that filter gets returned. So we will return the data, and we want to check to see what that color is, although did this tell us? Yeah, there it is right there. So we don't need to do this again. There is the color blue, and that number sign was causing us a problem. So, long story short, long story long, we are using the filter to adjust that. Very nice to have that. And I think this is back to normal, except we didn't have those in there. And on the 2 as well, we can also receive a callback, which we've done. So we're passing this a callback parameter on the 2. And we're collecting the result. Both of these things don't need the little brackets because we're receiving only one thing, although we might want to get that set up for other things. This one, I mean, there's the command. You'll need to collect the command as you filter through multiple steps. You want to know which step you're on. And also we have the ability to send extra data. It's called extra. And you can collect the extra that we have in the tower, for instance, the ID for the rooms are being sent through as an extra. And we have the ability to collect that to take a look at it here as well. So keep those round brackets in there because it might be useful. These ones, we're only going to receive a result ever. So here we are checking our result and doing the pane depending on which way we go. All right, this is the HTML side. One more small thing, although it's kind of a cool thing, is we've also applied accessibility to these components. So you can turn on a screen reader and the components will be read to you as you tab through them, and you can hit enter and submit and operate this form canvas with accessibility. So that's unique or a relatively rare, I would imagine, in Canvas libraries. I know Pixie's got some work with that. I'm not sure how they progressed on it. Probably they progressed well. Last time I looked about a year ago, and ZIM is much more robust and complete with respect to that. I would imagine they've upped their game though. All right, great. Let's take a look at the PHP side. So here's the Canvas PHP. We have seen this kind of code before a number of times, so we don't have to look through it too much, but we're logging into our database. And also just a reminder that we've also got all the explanations in here in the Canvas_comments PHP. So we're receiving our information. If we want to reply back with get, we need that in there. And we're doing the same thing that we did before, where we're, hey, if it's get, then we're going to collect the get variables. Otherwise, we're going to collect the post variables. And I just noticed in the last video, I mentioned that we would be using a loop to look through these things. And I see now that there is no loop here. Where did we use that loop then? Let me just do a quick check on the form with the Ajax, was it? Yeah, let's look at the Ajax PHP here. Any loop in here? Nope, as a matter, oh right, because we would be collecting only post. So not the Ajax one. What about, this is what will be in the zip file when the zip file gets posted there. Hopefully it will be there when you look at this. Form.php. Okay, check in here. Any loops in the form.php? No loops. So it would be in the tower.php. And what we've done is in the HTML of the tower, we've included the PHP commented out there. So you can see what the PHP for the tower looks like. It must have been there. Anyway, it's not important, but it was a way to loop through these things so that we don't have to list them. I guess closing the form. Coming back to look at the canvas, we certainly haven't done that here because there's only one bit of data that we need to collect, and that is the data. So this is us collecting what the bind data is. When we sent that to, we didn't specify what data we wanted to send. So it's going to be all of the bindings, but as one JSON object called data. Okay, cool. So we get one JSON object called data comes in either via get or via post. We would then, on the PHP side, use JSON decode. Increase the size here a bit. We would use JSON decode instead of JSON parse in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, it's JSON parse and JSON stringify. Here in PHP, it's JSON decode and JSON encode are your two. So we're turning that object or that JSON data back into a PHP object. Now, you can also turn it back into what's called an associative array by saying true here, and then it will be turned into an associative array. If you were doing that, you wouldn't access it this way, but rather with square brackets and like that. And like this. Hard work, this PHP, isn't it? There we go. So if you put the true on, then you would use an associative array. Oh, that doesn't look quite right. Nah, you don't need these things anymore. There. You would access, that's much easier. You would access it like so. But I thought I would keep the objects. When you build an associative array, that's when you put those. Oh, there's my alarm going off. How do I have a video conference to do in a half hour, but we'll be fine. Off. So I thought I'd just use the object-oriented approach here rather than the older associative array, but either one would have been fine. When you make an associative array, you use that equal sign arrow and one more. There we go. Okay, so we're now turning our JSON string back into a PHP object. We're then accessing the object. This is like the dot syntax in JavaScript, Java, ActionScript, etc. So that's the dot. So object dot name dot text. So the name property. Let's pop on over here. This will help. Close your eyes for a second. Hello. You still there? We're almost there. I'm looking for the data, which I'm pretty sure is in here somewhere. Ah, there it is. Okay, let's copy that one and put it on into here so we can have a look. This is what the data looks like. I don't know if that'll help. I suppose so. The data is a JSON string, but once we convert it, it's gonna look roughly like this. So the ID will be the name, the count, and the color. So ID, name, count, color, etc. This is how the data looks that comes from the ZIM binding. Any binding IDs are your first objects. And then within those objects are the properties. So then it's whatever property you stored, and there might be multiple. For instance, with the shapes, we stored the X, the Y, the level, the color, the shape, etc. We can store all those things. Here, we've only got one property per ID that we're sending. It happens to be the text property for the name, the current value. So we're accessing now. This will get us the value at these things. So this thing is going to be the values that are in here. And we're storing those in $name, $count, and $color. Those are coming from the client, which means that we'll need to, when we insert them into the database here, we're going to insert into our form. Here's what the form looks like. We have an ID, we have a name, count, and color. The ID is an integer, and this time it's auto-incrementing. We're not actually doing anything with the ID. We're going to let it handle itself. So each record that gets added when we submit the form is just going to keep on adding in with an auto-incrementing ID. And when you set up your table, you just hit the checkbox on auto-incrementing, and it'll pop up saying, hey, make this a primary, and you say, okay, and just go. And so that's what we've got here, primary ID. Then the name is text, the count is an integer, and the color is text. And so that's what that looks like. We're going to fill up this table now. So we're inserting into that the ID, the name, the count, and the color. And by the way, the order of that doesn't matter, just as long as you match it here, it'll figure it out. So I could put the color first if I wanted to, but usually we put them in the order that they show up in the table. And then we're inserting the values of null for the ID, which probably means, I don't even think we need to pass in the ID, but whatever, I like to see it there. So null because it's auto-incrementing, so it'll handle itself. But then these guys came from the client, so we need to put the question marks. This is how MySQLi handles its binding, or handles the problem of MySQLi injection. No, ooh, that's scary. MySQL injection, which was a way hackers could pass in extra commands and see your database. But MySQLi solved that, so there is no MySQLi injection. And we can only inject our own binding values here. So then we make our statement, we prepare it, and we bind to the name, the count, and the color. So these are our data coming in. Now that's been pulled out of the JSON. A lot of the times, unless you're storing a new record each time and you want those fields there, if we wanted to, we could store a new record with just the JSON in it. But JSON doesn't sort. It doesn't show up in separate, we'd end up seeing this in our table, and that's not too valuable if you're wanting to look at those results. It's fine if you're just sending those things back to the client, and then the client can deal with them. It's better that way, as a matter of fact, usually, because then they just get the object and they turn it back into what they were working with. Easy. That's why we're using JSON a lot. But if we're just wanting to store what's in the JSON in a database, usually we want to take it out of the JSON, and here it is. And that way we've got a nice table of all of the names, all of the counts, and all of the colors. And we can do things like sort them and report them. Okay, so we split the data from the JSON, and we inserted each, and then we bind them. Great. We execute it, and we say success. And that's it. So here we are successing. This is the information that comes back to the get. Here would be the information that comes back to the post, and that's what pops up and gets put into our pane for a result, saying thanks, sport. Or that was if it were a success, then that's what we did there. Neat, huh? Yay! Anything else? No, I think that's it. Oh, thank you for your support. All right. And here we go. We shall hit this last. This could be the last time, well, unless we come back for some socket work, but that would be much later. Or whatever, who knows when we'll get to it. But this will be the last one for now in the data. And yeah, last time you see this dancing Dr. Abstract with his beanie, I guess, of brains, his brain beanie. Yeah, so this has been Learn JavaScript and Beyond with Creative Coding. I am Dr. Abstract. Come on in, join us at zimjs.com/Slack, and don't be shy. Say hi. Go to that tower and say hi. Yeah, if you like the look of that tower, you know, that's total old school stuff. Come on in and say hi there too. It'd be fun to see you there. Dr. Abstract signing out. Ciao.